Department of Justice has issued a report on the death of Jeffrey Epstein.
Sex offender Jeffrey Epstein.
Jeffrey Epstein.
Jeffrey Epstein.
Jeffrey Epstein.
In January 2024, a federal court ordered that the previously classified documents on Jeffrey Epstein's case be made public. It was a day the whole world had been waiting for, a day when the truth came to light. But what dark secrets lurk within these pages? And what ungodly horrors were perpetrated by the hands of the disgraced billionaire? Join us as we attempt to unravel the mysteries surrounding Jeffrey Epstein's death, crimes, and the conspiracy theories. The day Jeffrey Epstein died. On August 10, 2019, disgraced billionaire and notorious sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein was found unresponsive in his cell at the Metropolitan Correctional Center in New York. According to officials, Epstein was found with a noose made out of a bedsheet around his neck. The medical examiners ruled the death a suicide, but curious minds want to know what exactly happened on that fateful day. An air of mystique surrounds this story, as each party involved weaved tales that would exonerate them, and the truth remains elusive. Beyond the facade put up by the authorities, many have peered behind those curtains and unmasked a plot straight out of Hollywood. A plot to kill Epstein. The plot. Crazy as it may seem, a lot of people don't believe that Epstein's death was a suicide. Or how would the government allow such a high-profile prisoner the liberty to take his own life? To many people, it seems implausible. A trip through the events that punctuated that very day will illuminate the hidden pointers, which may lead us to the truth about what happened to the billionaire. First, on this very day, the security seemed to let down their guards, as it was reported that proper check wasn't done for Epstein as was required. You see, prior to this incident, the disgraced financier had an episode where he tried to take his own life. It was unsuccessful, but as a precaution, he was put on suicide watch. According to the reports released by the Bureau of Prison and the Department of Justice, the prison staff members failed to check on Epstein in the hours leading to his death. Following the policy of the Bureau of Prison, staff members are required to check on inmates in solitary confinement at least once every 30 minutes. This was to ensure that incidents like this were avoided at all costs. So why did the guards refuse to check on Epstein, despite knowing he was capable of taking his own life? Even more damning was the fact that Epstein's roommate, who could have served as a roadblock to his plan, was removed from the cell just before Epstein gave up the ghost. Coincidence? We'll let you decide. Speaking of coincidences and theories, Epstein's story is rife with them. Or how convenient could it be that Epstein would die just weeks before he was scheduled to appear in court for sex trafficking charges? Just weeks before he was scheduled to take proper responsibility for his many crimes, why did he choose to die now? Was it out of disgrace? Was this indeed a suicide or a carefully orchestrated murder? Even if we could derail from the path of sanity and entertain the conspiracies for a minute, the question would still remain, who would do such a thing and why? As we unwrap this plot like a movie scene, we hope to uncover this truth piece by piece. But the plot thickens even further. This time, a new player emerges. Reed Weingarten, Epstein's lawyer, who believes that the accounts of the billionaire's death weren't entirely truthful. According to Weingarten, who had met with Epstein shortly before his death, the man wasn't a despairing, despondent, suicidal person. He looked full of life, and maybe even hopeful. So why would he take his own life? The lawyer argues. But the theory goes even deeper. According to reports, the broken bones in Epstein's neck weren't consistent with what would be experienced in the case of strangulation. Instead, it looked more like he had suffered an assault. This lent even more credibility to the claims that there was more to the Epstein story than is being led on. The then President of the United States, Donald Trump, also pitched in as well, retweeting a conspiracy theory that alleged that former President Bill Clinton had a hand in Epstein's death. Unfortunately, one piece of evidence that could have put all the theories to rest remains elusive. The CCTV footage of Epstein's first suicide attempt was said to have been erased due to technical error, a strange coincidence some would like to point out. Why would such a crucial record, which could totally alter the direction of the Epstein case, simply disappear? How could such a highly revered facility be faulted at such a critical time? Or was there more to this story than meets the eye? We'll have to wait and see. As the mountain load of evidence supporting the murder theory continues to pile up, a new one emerges. According to the accounts of the prison psychologists, Epstein constantly remarked during his final days that he was not contemplating suicide. "Why would you ever think I would be suicidal? I am not suicidal, and I would never be," Epstein emphatically informed a prison official. In addition, Epstein also cited his Jewish belief, which stands firmly against suicide as part of the reasons he would never contemplate taking his own life. Also, according to the Bureau of Prisons documents released by the New York Times, Epstein was said to have declared on one occasion that he was not a coward who would do that to himself. What's more, even the two guards who were supposed to watch over him that day admitted to lapses, and they consistently lied on documents about whether they checked his cell on the night of his death. According to these documents, no checks were made to Epstein's cell for almost 8 hours. From around 10:40 p.m. on August 9 till around 6:30 a.m. on August 10 when he was found dead, no officers had monitored him, nor did they check to see if something fishy was going on. This lapse in security, coupled with the fact that the prolific sex offender was left all alone in his cell, with an extra linen bedspread, created the perfect avenue for Epstein to give in to the voices in his head. But is this really the whole story? Or are there more revelations beneath the surface? What if? Since Epstein's death, dozens of theories have emerged, blaming everyone from Bill Clinton to the British royal family. His network ran deep, and he knew too much, so there were probably a couple of people who would have loved to see him silenced. So what if Epstein was set up for suicide? What if the government wanted him to kill himself? Bold assertions, to be honest, but the peddlers of this theory seem to hold their view close to the heart. However, according to the FBI, there was no foul play involved in Epstein's death. On the other hand, the prison staff have admitted that there was a flaw in the security process on that day. But in spite of this lapse, no evidence has been found to suggest that Epstein was murdered. Also, after conducting extensive interviews with some of the inmates, none was able to provide credible information to prove that Epstein's death was nothing more than suicide. Based on the official narrative, it's safe to say that Epstein's death was a preventable hazard, which resulted from a chain of unrelated events. From the inattentive guards to the absence of a cellmate, this tale seems to have been well written with no holes, the man behind the mask. To understand why Epstein's death has received so much publicity, especially in the early days of 2024, we must take a trip back to the times when the billionaire was the king of an empire. Believe it or not, for the longest of times, Jeffrey Epstein lived like a king, who could do whatever he wanted without any consequences. With connections to some of the high and mighty men in the society, including presidents, prominent politicians, and even the British royal family, it's no surprise this man was untouchable. However, his beginning was a bit more humble. Epstein's first career path was as a maths teacher at the elite Dalton School, but as the 1970s rolled in, he decided to pursue a more luxurious career path. First, he worked under the investment bank Bear Stearns, where he learned the intricacies of operating a financial institution. Armed with a wealth of knowledge and experience, Epstein later founded his own firm, J. Epstein & Co., back in 1982. As an ingenious marketer, Epstein advertised his services only to those with assets worth more than $1 billion, so his clientele was filled with those at the upper echelons of the society. All business was done out of the U.S. Virgin Islands as part of Epstein's plan to evade taxes. With more money at his disposal than he knew what to do with, Epstein spends a whole lot on his lavish lifestyle. From acquiring massive townhouses to owning a private island on the U.S. Virgin Islands, Epstein embodied the billionaire status. But just like many things about his character, Epstein's billionaire status has also been called into question. According to Forbes, the billionaire designation might be a bit too much for the financier, as his net worth was determined to have been around half of that. By the time he died, Epstein was worth just a little over $577 million, which is still a pretty penny, to be honest. With money in his pocket and an unlimited source of protection, Epstein began to allegedly perpetrate crimes that would make the devil shudder. Right on his island, Epstein would recruit underage girls, paying them hundreds of dollars to give him massages. But these encounters would usually turn sexual, as Epstein would demand more than a simple touch, sometimes forcefully having his way with these little kids. Some of these victims also reported that sometimes they were hired for straight-up prostitution, for the pleasure of the disgraced billionaire and his clients. Although officials have had their eyes on the billionaire for a while, everything began to come to light in 2005. It was at Palm Beach, Florida, that the truth began to emerge, after the family of a 14-year-old victim came forward with allegations that Epstein had sexually molested their daughter at his mansion. This revelation ignited a fire that soon burned down the web of lies he had woven over the years. Soon, multiple underage girls began to report to the police that Epstein had hired them to give sexual massages, while he was aware they were underage. These revelations sent shockwaves through the media, creating a massive storm that continues to rage even today. By May 2006, Palm Beach police had gathered enough evidence, and it was time to set the ball rolling. First, they secured paperwork to charge Epstein with multiple counts of unlawful sex with a minor. However, there was a twist no one saw coming. In a surprising turn of events, the state attorney Barry Krischer decided that the case would go before a grand jury. In July 2006, officers arrested Jeffrey Epstein after a grand jury indicted him on a single count of soliciting prostitution. This was a minor charge compared to the overwhelming accusations that were leveled against him, and as expected, it caused a massive media circus. Critics such as Palm Beach police leaders even assailed the state attorney for giving Epstein special treatment, and many were quick to point out that it seemed Krischer was trying to find a way to sweep the case under the carpet. At the same time, the matter caught federal attention, and the FBI began an investigation into the matter. But Epstein's lawyers didn't want the feds involved. By 2007, the federal prosecutors had prepared an indictment against the money manager. But for a whole year, the case seemed to remain stagnant. Behind the scenes, Epstein's lawyers sought to settle the case with a plea bargain so as to escape the possibility of a federal prosecution. According to the lawyers, Epstein's accusers were unreliable witnesses, and their accounts couldn't be taken seriously. The case dragged on until June 2008, when Epstein pleaded guilty to the initial state charges: one count of soliciting prostitution and one count of soliciting prostitution from a minor under the age of 18. This seemed like an easy way out, as he was sentenced to just 18 months in prison. Under a secret agreement reached in the shadows, the Office of the U.S. Attorney agreed not to prosecute Epstein for his federal crimes. And so the billionaire once again stood at the victorious end. Although on the outside it appeared the law had punished him for his misdeeds, the weight of the sentence was not proportional to the crimes he had committed. His jail term was also more of a luxury than a punishment. While serving the only 13 months he did out of the 18, Epstein was allowed to leave the jail during the day so he could attend to business affairs, and so his sentence was only served at night. By July 2009, Jeffrey Epstein walked out of jail a free man, and in the eyes of the law, he had paid for his wild ways. However, the story didn't end there, and this next chapter brought about a couple of shocking events that altered the whole case forever. Justice, Phase 2. Following Jeffrey Epstein's release in 2009, many victims took to the media to express their displeasure with his sentence. For the next decade, multiple new victims decided to lend their voices to the ongoing legal battle. The next phase of this process was to get the federal non-prosecution agreement voided so he could be held responsible for the many other crimes he had committed. The most vocal of these accusers at the time was a woman named Virginia Giuffre. She claimed that Epstein and his girlfriend and partner Ghislaine Maxwell had recruited her when she was just 17 years old. According to Giuffre, the criminal duo set up sexual encounters with politicians, academicians, businessmen, and even members of the royal family. It was this accusation that implicated Britain's Prince Andrew in one of the most highly publicized aspects of the case. For many years, the Duke of York found himself in the spotlight for all the wrong reasons. His trail of controversies and scandals had earned him a reputation as one of the most problematic members of the British monarchy. But Prince Andrew's biggest crime so far would be his friendship with sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein. Since Epstein was arrested, Prince Andrew released several statements concerning his friendship with the prolific criminal. But unlike other former associates who denounced the disgraced billionaire, the Duke of York stuck with his friend of old, constantly emphasizing that he does not regret his interactions with Epstein in any way or form. As if to further establish his point, Prince Andrew recorded an interview at Buckingham Palace with journalist Emily Maitlis. This all-revealing exposé delved into the nature of the Duke's relationship with Epstein, while also denying the accusations made by one of Epstein's victims that he participated in the illicit sexual affair on many occasions. Although the details of their friendship had remained secret for a long time, everything was laid bare in January of 2022, after Virginia Roberts Giffey came out to accuse Prince Andrew of sexual abuse. According to Giffey, she was introduced to the Duke by Epstein, and he allegedly participated in illicit sexual acts while fully aware that she was a minor. Since the news of this accusation hit the airwave, the Duke of York has come under heavy fire, although he continues to vehemently deny any wrongdoing. The case dragged on for a while, before both parties eventually opted for an out-of-court settlement in 2022. Although the terms of the agreement are shielded behind walls of paperwork and classified files, reports indicate that it involved a hefty donation from the prince to Giffey's charity. According to some inside sources, the payout was so hefty, even the Queen had to pitch in to meet up with the demand. As this whirlwind rocked the royal family, the Duke of York asked to step down from his royal responsibilities so as to minimize the damage to the royal family. But what's done is done. Prince Andrew's relationship with such a notorious character not only affected him, but it also brought the royal family under heavy fire. But how did Andrew meet a man like Epstein in the first place? And why did they become so close? To find the answers, we travel back to 1999, the year when the path of these two men crossed. According to a report published by The Guardian, this friendship of doom was orchestrated by Ghislaine Maxwell, a British socialite and friend of the royal family. Maxwell was Epstein's girlfriend and partner in crime at the time. While the extent of Epstein's relationship with Andrew is largely unknown, several never-before-seen photographs of the Duke hanging out with the billionaire have surfaced. In this picture, we can clearly see Prince Andrew and Epstein walking side by side, with Maxwell standing between them dressed in green. The woman in pink is Caroline Stanley, the Countess of Derby. But that's not all. Look at this other picture taken in 2010, which shows both men walking side by side. This was after Epstein was released from prison, which indicates that the two had continued their friendship even after Epstein's criminal history became public knowledge. According to the Duke of York, he only met with the billionaire about once or twice a year, and Epstein was said to have maintained a financial relationship with Andrew's ex-wife, Fergie. While Prince Andrew now regrets ever associating with Epstein and publicizing their relationship, the damage seems to have been done. With more damning evidence being unveiled as time rolled by, we can only wonder how deep the trail of criminality between Epstein and his many friends go. However, Prince Andrew isn't the only public figure implicated in this case. One other name that continues to echo in the halls of justice is Ghislaine Maxwell. But who is Ghislaine Maxwell? And what role did she play in the whole episode? Let's dig even deeper. Ghislaine Maxwell. In December 2021, British socialite Ghislaine Maxwell was sentenced to 20 years in prison after she was found guilty of 5 federal sex trafficking charges. Along with the infamous Jeffrey Epstein, Maxwell was said to have recruited young girls for prostitution, and the crime would go unchecked for many years. It all started in 1991, when Maxwell met Epstein through a mutual friend. The two became cordial quite quickly, and throughout the 1990s, they grew their network, socializing with Donald Trump, Bill Clinton, and of course, Prince Andrew. The jet-setting lifestyle lasted for a while, until they both decided to put down roots in a $5 million New York townhouse. But how did a simple amorous affair take such a dark turn? According to federal prosecutors, it all started in 1994. This was the first time Maxwell would help Epstein in his sexual exploitation of underage girls. The victim of this first assault was a 16-year-old named Annie Farmer, who alleged that she was lured onto Epstein's ranch in New Mexico, unaware of the fate that awaited her. According to the victim's account, Maxwell had insisted on giving her a massage before Epstein jumped in on the action, physically restraining and sexually assaulting her in one of the bedrooms at the ranch. It was a day that remained forever etched in her mind. In her revelations to the court, Farmer stated that Maxwell was a really important part of the grooming process and that the couple worked together as a team. Naturally, the presence of a female figure on the scene would keep the victims at rest, projecting a false sense of security. But what happens when the very female, whose presence should signify safety, joins in on the abuse? It's a twist none of the victims ever saw coming. Even after Epstein was arrested, Maxwell maintained all connections to him and continued to work at his properties. She would later be implicated in the infamous Virginia Gifford case. According to Gifford's account, Maxwell worked hand-in-hand with Epstein to keep her as a sex slave for years. But the attention of the law had not yet turned to Maxwell, even after officials had been aware of her criminal history for a while. But on a fateful day in July 2020, the FBI launched a raid on a remote estate in New Hampshire, where Maxwell was found living. In the words of Bill Sweeney, the assistant director of the FBI's New York field office, Maxwell had slithered away to a gorgeous property in New Hampshire, continuing to live a life of privilege, while her victims continued to live with the trauma inflicted on them for years. The arrest didn't go so smoothly. After Maxwell had failed to open the door to agents, they were forced to break it down and forcefully take her into custody. Now, the days of evading the law were over, and it was time to face the music. On December 29, 2021, Ghislaine Maxwell was found guilty of 5 federal sex trafficking charges. The world watched on as the untouchable Maxwell stood before the court to answer to her many crimes. With her role as a recruiter, charged with getting young girls to be subjected to this abominable act, it's no surprise that her influence in this story runs really deep. After the guilty verdict was delivered, Maxwell's legal team began working round the clock to appeal the decision. They also launched a bid for a retrial after one of the jurors confessed he had a personal history of sexual abuse. However, these claims didn't hold up in court, and the appeal was thrown out. In addition to the 20-year sentence, Maxwell was also fined $750,000. Judge Allison Nathan, who delivered the verdict, described Maxwell's crimes as heinous and predatory, making her an example to others like her masquerading in society. But as the curtains closed on Maxwell's case, another episode opened on the side, one capable of implicating some very high-profile characters in American politics. Before we uncover more secret revelations, here's our subscribers' pick for today. As we uncover the secrets of Jeffrey Epstein's criminal history, one question continues to hang in the clouds. Was Epstein's death truly a suicide? Did the billionaire take his own life? Or was this an inside operation, carefully disguised and executed? Our attention turns to the very day when the prolific sex offender was found unresponsive in his cells, and our minds are filled with unanswered questions. Like, why did the guards leave him alone in his cell? Why didn't they check on him for so many hours? How did a man who held the secrets of America's most powerful people in his hands pass away in one of the most secure correctional facilities in the country? Where do we go from here? Join in the conversation by dropping your views in the comments section. Now let's get back to the video. The day Epstein came back to life. In the early days of 2024, the infamous Epstein list was unsealed by the court, creating a whole new media storm around the late billionaire's case. As part of a settled lawsuit, a federal judge had ordered last December that these documents be made public. As it now, about 4,553 pages of documents have been made public, and they include the names of over 150 people connected to or mentioned during Epstein's trials. The identities of these players were largely confidential and shielded from previous public documents and interviews. But Judge Loretta Presk wants the public to know the truth. It is worth noting that some of these people had only a passing connection to the whole scandal and have not been accused of any criminal wrongdoing. This final batch of released documents further implicates the Duke of York, as it reveals that Epstein paid the victim $15,000 to engage in sexual activities with Prince Andrew back in 2011. When Andrew's lawyer was approached for a statement, he declined. But that's not where the story ends. The heavily redacted document also alleged that Ghislaine was directed to engage in sexual activities with another prince, who remained unnamed, as well as an anonymous owner of a large hotel chain, and Glenn Dubin, a billionaire hedge fund manager. Ghislaine also revealed that she had been forced into sexual encounters with retail magnate and former Victoria's Secret CEO Leslie Wexner multiple times. However, Wexner vigorously denies these allegations, claiming that he had never engaged in any sexual activity, legal or otherwise, with Miss Ghislaine. As the world tries to grapple with these astounding revelations, Ghislaine dropped another bombshell. This time, it involved former President Bill Clinton. According to the victim, Clinton had visited Epstein's Little James Island for dinner, although she never witnessed the former president participate in any illicit act. But Clinton wasn't the only former president involved in the scandal. Even Donald Trump was thrust into the mix. These declassified documents revealed that Trump had allegedly visited the island on certain occasions, but Ghislaine maintains that she never saw Trump in any compromising situations. Another alleged victim, Johanna Schoberg, also mentions Clinton and Trump in her unsealed deposition, claiming that both parties had visited the island, although they didn't participate in any wrongdoing. But another victim, Sarah Ransom, has a different story to tell. In the many emails containing her story, Ransom revealed to a New York Post columnist in 2016 that Trump, Clinton, and others were allegedly involved in Epstein's sex trafficking scheme. The allegations would later be recanted in another follow-up email. Speaking on the accusations, Trump stated that he had not met Epstein for 15 years prior to his death, and that even then he was not a fan of the billionaire. As for Clinton, his spokesperson didn't immediately respond to the accusations, but the former president himself had initially denied any knowledge of Epstein's wrongdoings, while also claiming that he had not spoken to the financier in over a decade. Back to Epstein's list. Apart from high-profile politicians, the list also includes a couple of celebrities and other known figures, although the details on their activities are quite sparse. This shouldn't come as a surprise, though, as Epstein was a well-respected member of the society before his secret activities became public. With immeasurable wealth and influence at his disposal, Epstein rolled around with some of the biggest names in America. He would offer celebrities rides in his private jet, invite them to his islands and mansions, and try to maintain a mutual connection with them. Whether these celebrities and public figures engaged in illegal sexual activities organized by Epstein remains unclear. As the case grows wider by the day, we are left to deal with the aftermath of the shocking revelations. How did one of the most respected members of the society turn out to be a predator? Why did the US government keep such a huge scandal under the covers for years? And what fate awaits the figures implicated in these recent revelations? We'll have to wait and see. Thank you for watching this video. See you in the next one.